Well, welcome into Bayou Roar. On this episode, we'll be recapping LSU's big weekend down in Jacksonville for baseball. Then we'll wrap up the show by talking about some Lady Tiger basketball. But of course, we got to start with the baseball team, which headed on down to Jacksonville, Florida this past weekend, faced Indiana, Notre Dame, and UCF, and ended up sweeping through the weekend, getting a big time tournament win down there. And look, there were some games that definitely made you hold your breath a little bit. You were pretty dominant in some of your other performances. There was a lot of good, not as much bad or negative takeaways from this one, but still some things obviously you would like to see improved. But all in all, very, very good weekend for LSU across the board. And we're going to break it down first, but I've got to be completely honest before we do. If you're like me, this past weekend was a tough weekend for you in terms of trying to watch LSU play in this tournament, because I am not one that is willing to pay $30 to watch three baseball games. I love LSU. I love LSU baseball, but that was just something that I was not going to do. And look, no like offense trying to be given to D1 baseball. I get it. You got bills to pay, you've got employees to pay, you've got all this stuff, right? You got to keep the lights on somehow. But I mean, $30 per person to watch, honestly, three games for me at least. I mean, there might be some that watch more, but I'm just watching my team play. That's a little bit stiff. That's just a little bit stiff. I'm surprised ESPN even lets LSU go down there and play that tournament, when they are supposed to have like the exclusive streaming rights for SEC and all that stuff. But all that being said, I had to park myself every single day and listen to the radio broadcast of it to try to get, a sense of what was going on, because I knew there would be no other streams available, if you catch my drift here, that would last past like the third inning of play. So, with that being said, it was difficult to keep up with it, but I'm glad that I stuck through it all because it was a very, very good weekend for LSU. And look, I know Indiana, Notre Dame, and UCF are probably not the most dominant Power Four teams that you could have faced across the weekend, but you're 8-0 coming out of this thing. And honestly, you looked really, really good. Think about what happened this past weekend with like Tennessee. Tennessee played Kent State, a team that last Monday you beat 10-7, and people like to poke fun that like, hey, LSU really struggled with Kent State. They had this big lead and that it kind of got evaporated and they had to hold on 10-7. And then Kent State goes to Knoxville and wins 2 out of 3 games across the weekend. And you wonder why I was a little bit lower on Tennessee than most when I was doing my schedule breakdown for LSU this year. It's because of that. It's going to be different without Tony Vitello. It's going to be different without your pitching coach. And when you play really good ball teams like Kent State, they're not the most dominant team in the world, but they're a very good team. You can struggle sometimes. You can lose focus and you can lose those games. And so at any point across this weekend, even though LSU was the better team in every matchup, I mean, they could have dropped one. They totally could have dropped one because they had some talent on all of these teams. And they could have easily dropped one, but they didn't. And they won the tournament and had some really great performances. So excited about that because, again, at any point in time, you may lose to McNeese this upcoming week. You just might. You might just drop one at some point. But this was a very, very good weekend down in Jacksonville for the Tigers. And so we're going to start our breakdown of the performances with the pitching staff. And we'll talk about the starting pitching first. Let's talk about Friday and Mr. Kason Evans. So Kason Evans, of course, is coming off a weekend where he struggled a little bit. He struggled a little bit in his first start and had a lot of strikeouts, threw a lot of strikes, some good stuff there, but couldn't get past like 3 innings of work. And oh man, it was just not the outing that you wanted. But this one against Indiana was much, much better. And look, there are still a lot of fans that are on Kason Evans about just that he's not the Friday guy. He just doesn't deserve a spot right now in the starting rotation. He's a bullpen arm, yada, yada, yada. Y'all, we have got to stop overreacting to little things. Yes, I know that while Evans was on the mound, three of the seven runs Indiana scored, were put up on the board. And that's not great, obviously. Technically, only two of them were scored off of Case and Evans, and one was scored off of an error. But still, three runs were scored while Evans was on the mound. And while, yes, that's not great, this was a very good performance for Case and Evans. Through the first two innings, he was cruising. And I mean cruising. Yes, he wasn't getting strikeouts, but he was doing the type of stuff we talked about last weekend that you have to do to maintain yourself in a game if as a starting pitcher. And that was getting soft contact, getting ground outs, getting fly balls, all that stuff to where you're not running up your pitch count and you're going to be able to extend your outing where you're not getting pulled after three innings, but instead you're getting pulled out after five or six and maybe at best seven innings. Very rarely are you going to have a kid at the college level pitch a complete game. Obviously, it can happen from time to time. It's just very, very rare that happens. But if a starter on an average weekend can get you, like I said, that 5 to 6 inning range, that's really good. And Inside LSU Baseball tweeted this out. If you're not following them, they are a phenomenal LSU Baseball podcast. They give out a lot of good stuff here. And he put Case and Evans, definitely had that struggle in the third inning, but very much finished strong. Got the Tigers into the sixth on 80 pitches. Lots of soft contact, finished with a stat line of 5 innings pitched, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, and 4 strikeouts. That's a solid day. That's a solid day. If you tell me he can improve off of that performance and continue to get better, I'm feeling really good about Case and Evans. I think we got really spoiled last year with Cade Anderson as the Friday guy because he was dominant from start to finish. But what did I say last weekend? To me, Case and Evans is a lot more like Anthony Ianson, where Ianson took a minute to really kind of get into a groove. And once he did, he really found it and never really looked back. And in my mind, I'm thinking Case and Evans is a lot more like Anthony Ianson, and Cooper Moore's been a lot more like Cade Anderson, which we'll talk about in just a second. But Cooper Moore's been pretty much dialed in from the get-go as a veteran guy who has started a lot of games before. And Casey Evans looks like a guy that's making that transition from reliever and ace out of the bullpen to full-time starter. We've got to give him some time. We can't just expect Casey Evans to go in there and be dominant as a starter when he's never had to do that before. We've seen flashes of it, and he made starts against Tennessee and did fairly well and had other performances that stand out too throughout the course of his freshman year. But as a full-time starter, it's going to take him a minute to change that mindset, change that mentality, change how he paces himself throughout the game. Everything changes. But I trust that Casey Evans both has the talent and the ability to be the starting pitcher for LSU in this rotation this year. You may have to be a little bit more patient than you would like, but I think he is going to turn into a guy that you really, really need. And also, too, I mean, where else do you go? I mean, where else do you go? Is it Gavin Guidry? Maybe. I don't know. Zach Cowan, I don't really think is that everybody wanted him to start last year. I don't think he's really that guy. I don't know where else you go other than the three guys you've already got starting across the weekend, maybe flip flopping or tweaking and moving around pieces. But I really like what LSU's rotation looked like this weekend. And I think Case and Evan plays a big part of that. And I think as he continues to get more comfortable, you'll see better and better outings from him. Now, we'll move on, though, because I felt like Case and Evans was fine, but Cooper Moore, again, was very, very dominant. Cooper Moore looked very, very good. Again, he was on cruise control throughout most of this one. Kind of towards the end of the outing, he kind of started to fizzle out a little bit, but it was still a very, very strong performance for Cooper Moore throughout it. He has been by far your best starting pitcher through the first two weekends. And I don't know if that's super surprising because, again, he is a veteran arm that was a starter at Kansas last year. Like, it's not like he's just coming out of nowhere walking into this thing, just dominating. But I'm impressed by Cooper Moore because he just has a very good command over the zone. He knows what he wants to do. I think the Notre Dame coach even mentioned in his post game interview that like Cooper Moore actually threw kind of a different style than they were expecting. Like that he was moving a pitch that they thought he would lean on a lot to like his third or fourth pitch instead of like being one that he would throw in maybe first or second. So, Cooper Moore showing that he can do it in a lot of different ways as well, which is really, really good. And so I think Cooper Moore is solidified as your either your Friday or your Saturday guy, depending on what you want to do, but he has been dominant nonetheless. But definitely the performance of the weekend in terms of starting pitching and definitely a bounce back effort here was William Schmidt on Sunday. William Schmidt, I know I was a little bit tough on last week because again, he just showed some of the things that he did as a freshman that he really struggled with, walks, kind of losing his composure at times, and he completely flipped that on its head this past Sunday. Against UCF, William Schmidt had a phenomenal performance. He only walked one batter the entire time, which is great. He showed you a lot of command, especially on the breaking balls and the off speed stuff. And look, if he pitches like that, you're going to feel really good about your Sunday, your Sunday games. I've mentioned it, I think, before, and I'll say it again. It is very rare that for a college baseball team, you've got a Friday and a Saturday guy that you feel comfortable with. It's even more rare to find a Sunday guy that you feel very comfortable with. A lot of times, Sundays are kind of the bottom of the barrel for a lot of teams across both the SEC, even and across the country in college baseball. It's just how the game is. You just don't have the elite depth to have three incredible starters that can go out there every single game. And again, you're lucky if you find even two. And so if William Schmidt can keep pitching like this and build off of this performance, LSU could have a very solid three-way punch for its starting pitching rotation throughout the rest of the season. William Schmidt, they talked about it on the radio a little bit. When you ask LSU players on this baseball team, by far who has like the nastiest stuff in terms of pitch repertoire, they all point at William Schmidt. And they all talk about how good William Schmidt is and just how nasty all of his pitches are. And I think you can see that for sure. You definitely see the potential that he has. And man, if he can hit that potential, it's going to be really scary because he could be a guy that just absolutely takes over. And so I will say, definitely I did not expect this type of performance from William Schmidt. I'll eat some crow here. I kind of thought maybe after last week's performance, we kind of saw who William Schmidt really was, and he proved me wrong. He absolutely proved me wrong. He went out there and dominated and did a very, very good job in a game in which you won 11-0. I mean, over UCF, and you run ruled them after 7. So really, really good stuff there from William Schmidt on Sunday. But it just didn't stop there in terms of pitching. The bullpen also had a very, very nice day across this weekend. You didn't have to use a whole lot of guys. I don't even think you had to really dig that deep into the bullpen. Like, I don't think you used Zach Cowan or Jaden Newt or Santiago Garcia at all this past weekend, which is great. Because you got that extended outing from all of your starters, but you saw a lot of really good things. Ethan Plog, honestly, kind of stood up tall this past weekend after kind of having some up and down performances throughout his first couple of outings. He really showed up big in the outing that he had this past weekend, and so did Devin Sheeran. I know it didn't start great for him, but man, he turned it on once it flipped to the next inning, and he was fantastic. He was fantastic for you after kind of a struggling start. And then Sunday, because of the run rule, you only had to go to Maverick Rizzi. So you only used William Schmidt and Maverick Rizzi and pretty much threw the game out of the way. It was awesome. It was awesome to see that. But again, you didn't have to go to Cowan. You didn't have to go to your big guns, your very loaded down bullpen. You didn't have to go to the biggest guns for the most of the series because you were doing so well with everybody else. And that was really good to see. Because again, down the line, you're going to have to limit this rotation for sure. You're throwing everybody out right now in the first couple weeks, but once you get into SEC play, you'll start to see the pitching rotation shrink a little bit. And then if you make it to the postseason, regionals, super regionals, Omaha, you'll see that rotation shrink even more. You're going to go from probably pitching, I mean, a ridiculous amount of guys. I can't even float out a number to probably about 8 to 9 guys once you get to the postseason. That's just how it naturally works. And so you're starting to see some of the guys that you really, really trust to come out of the bullpen and do some work, and some of the other guys that you go, okay, yeah, they still need some work, but still nice performances all across the board. So, with all that being said, I thought it was great. I thought it was a great weekend for the pitching staff. Obviously, you didn't break the strikeout record again this past weekend, but you don't have to do that all the time. Again, sometimes it's just about can you get across the finish line with a win, and you were able to do so in all of those games. Now, as for the offense, you had a very, very nice weekend across the board. I mean, against Indiana, you scored 14, you scored 9 against Notre Dame, and you scored 11 against UCF. And here's the thing, in all of those, you had really nice offensive days. Indiana, it was one of those weird things of like LSU didn't necessarily struggle offensively. Just for the longest time, they couldn't seem to get points up on the board. Like, I mean, at one point in time, they had a ridiculous amount of people on base. And it felt like once they got people on base, that's when they started striking out or popping out or whatever. And they just could not score. But then it was like the floodgates absolutely opened. Zach York hits a huge home run. And man, that really opened things up. Notre Dame, you started off extremely hot. It was kind of the complete opposite. You got out to a big lead very, very quickly. You kind of cooled off a little bit, but then you ended up getting a few more tacked on late, and you kind of ran away with it from there. And then UCF, you just really, really played well throughout the entirety of it. So again, 3 different ways that you won this thing, but some of the performances that stood out offensively for me in terms of batting were Stephen Milam, who had a huge weekend. Derek Curiel had some very nice moments. Of course, Jake Brown continues to be a monster. And Zach York had some nice moments as well. But Cade Aaron Beatty, holy smokes. I think he was probably one of the biggest winners of this weekend tournament because he hit several home runs. He continues to show some really great play at the catcher position defensively, which is what a lot of people were worried about coming into the year. How would he play defensively? He's done very, very well. Still some things to work on, but very, very good performances from him. And honestly, I think you just feel really good about where he's at as an overall catcher. He is playing extremely, extremely good ball. And I thought he was one of the biggest, you know, winners across the weekend. And of course, Seth Dardar continues to play well offensively too. But not just that, something I wanted to highlight was this. Defensively, you're starting to see Dardar kind of turn it up a lot. They noted that several times across broadcasts that I was listening to, whether it was highlights from the games and you were listening to the D1 baseball guys talk, or just on the radio broadcast itself, how Dardar really seemed like he was showing a lot of signs of improvement as a defensive player, which is not what he was known for coming over from Kansas State. He was much more known for his bat than his defensive prowess. And I think you can see the effort he's been putting into, again, just being a defensive guy, knowing that that's a big part of what LSU wants to do is to, play very solid defense. You had the best fielding team in LSU history a year ago The standards are very, very high for what you're going to do defensively. And look, I know I admitted Seth Dardar is probably my favorite, one of my favorite players on this team. I wouldn't say he's quite my favorite yet, but he's one of my favorite players on this team already. And he proved it again with a quote when somebody's asking him why he thinks he's been playing just so well to start this year. And he goes, I mean, it's the name that's across my chest that's inspiring me right now. I think that's what it is more than anything. I'm playing for LSU right now. And golly, if you just don't love that guy, I don't know what else can make you get to that point. But I love me some Seth Dardar. He is just playing out of his mind right now. So good. I love the performances you're getting out of him. And of course, you know, I think too, what you're seeing is a lot of depth from this LSU team because you've got Dardar available. You could also play Jack Record there as a defensive specialist guy. You could move Trent Caraway over to second if you really had to. Tanner Reeves could play second if you really have to. John Pearson could play third for you if you really need. You got a lot of depth across the infield. And I think you feel pretty good about, where you are in terms of just the talent level that you got there. But I think what's even more impressive is that you got through this weekend without Chris Stanfield. I mean, you played all 3 games without Chris Stanfield and you won all 3. Now, that is not to say that you do not need Chris Stanfield. Do not get me twisted up with that. You absolutely need Chris Stanfield. And here's why. Because I think it showed, at least to me, why Tanner Reeves is a guy that, yes, I get Jay loves a lot, but the outfield's not necessarily the place for him. And I think even sometimes defensively as a whole, it's not the place for him because Tanner Reeves had a play where he was trying to find a baseball. He went down to a knee and he could not make the play. He just completely misread it and it fell right in front of him. And look, that happens sometimes, but that was not necessarily like a very tricky fly ball to go catch. It was just one he completely misread. And again, it's because he's not really a left fielder. And neither was Braden Simpson. But Braden Simpson had a play similar to that of Tanner Reeves, and he actually made it. And look, again, Braden Simpson probably had some times where he struggled a little bit too, being kind of out of position. And it's incredible that you kind of won across this weekend with 2 guys that aren't really natural left fielders. But still, Tanner Reeves to me is a guy that I think across this weekend just showed, I get it. You love his bat, especially as a lefty. And he's got some power, he's got some good ability. But man, it's just one of those things of, I think if you're going to play him, you probably just need to put him in as a DH option from time to time. And maybe that's about it. And the tough part is I almost would rather Mason Braun at this point, the freshman that's just got so much power and can hit very, very well, over Tanner Reeves in that position too. And look, it happens. Ashton Larson was a guy that I absolutely loved a couple years ago. And then last year, just because of Chris Stanfield and Curriel coming in, you didn't really have room for him out in the outfield. You didn't really have a spot for him in the infield. And Ashton Larson kind of just became a guy that came in and pinched hit sometimes, DH'd maybe a time or two. And that was about it. It just happens. Sometimes the guys on these teams, and you love him to death, but he just doesn't really have a solid role. And I just don't think Reeves should have a very solid role on this team because he hasn't proven, at least to me, that he is worthy of that spot. And look, he's, obviously got some talent, or Jay wouldn't put him out there at all. But it's just, to me, like, I don't know, as compared to the other guys you got on the roster, I just don't think Reeves has really got a spot. And look, Braden Simpson, I think, did just fine, but obviously when Stanfield comes back, he'll be your left fielder full time. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If he was healthy, he would have played, and you would have probably continued to dominate even more. But I think that's also just kind of an incredible thing you take from this weekend is that, holy smokes, LSU's got some depth on their team where they were without their starting left fielder all weekend, and they still played as well as they did. So I really, really like what I saw from LSU across the entirety of their weekend in Jacksonville. Now, coming up, you do have to play McNeese, and that game will be happening, I think, the day that this releases. So I don't know who will get the start on the mound. I would assume it would probably be Jaden Newt, as he started your one of your midweek games last week. Wouldn't be surprised if it's, oh my gosh, what is that kid's name? I'm going to look it up real fast. Cowan started against Nichols last week, but Jay admitted that that was kind of like a reversed engineered game because the guy he probably would have rather started in that situation, they saved for last and kind of just let Coward basically be the closer for the first two innings. And then they kind of continually worked their way back up. Reagan Ricken. Reagan Ricken, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Jay tries to start him, a very talented freshman that, again, he really wanted to start against Nichols last week, but it just didn't feel like the right time. So they kind of reversed engineered the game. I don't know. But you got plenty of arms available, including Marcos Paz, another true talented true freshman. Whoever it is, though, I would expect that you would see a lot of the guys you didn't see across this weekend, just so that they get some time on the mound, which may absolutely suck for McNeese State because they may be getting you know, the loaded, the loaded gun of it all, because you'll have Santiago Garcia who will be fresh. You've got, like I mentioned, Cowart, Newt, Ricken, Paz, all fresh. I mean, all guys you could see on Tuesday night against McNeese State. Now, I will say this: it will be colder in Baton Rouge on Tuesday night than it has been so far. So it may not be your most productive offensive day, just because when it's colder, the ball just doesn't seem to travel as far. So don't be surprised if like it's a little bit of a struggle offensively for LSU on Tuesday. But honestly, with the talent that this team has, they should not really drop the ball against McNeese, I would think. But again, you could lose. I'm not going to predict a win or loss or whatever, but it's just expect that to be the case. And then, of course, you'll head into, I think, what's another long weekend for them where they're going to play maybe 3 or 4 games across next weekend. And I won't lie. I probably won't. Yeah, you're playing that weird series where it's Dartmouth, Northeastern, Dartmouth, Northeastern. So you're going to play 4 games in basically a long weekend, and you're going back and forth between Dartmouth and Northeastern. As we get into SEC play, I'll probably start previewing the upcoming SEC series after we recap the one that we just came off of. But I'm honestly not going to preview that series because, honestly, if LSU sweeps through the series, they sweep through it. If they lose one, they lose one. That's a series I don't really hold a lot of weight for, especially because you're off to such a hot start. I think you've gotten off to the start that you wanted to. And not saying you can just drop the ball from here, but I think you've gotten, if you're Jay Johnson, you've gotten a lot of good work out of these first 2 weeks. And there's a lot of momentum now rolling into it. Now, again, am I ready to push the fast forward button to let's go to Omaha, let's win another one, let's take it? Not quite. I'm still of the belief this team can make a run, can go to Omaha and compete. As for back-to-back championships, not quite ready to put the seal of approval on that quite yet. But this is a very talented team, and they are playing very, very well right now. I think if you're an LSU baseball fan, you should be happy with how this team has performed so far. So, with all that being said, great weekend of baseball. Obviously, you go back to playing some teams that you should beat across this week. So, hopefully not anything too dramatic this week, but hopefully we see a lot more good. And then we'll get ready here as we're about to turn the calendar to March next week for SEC play to really start dialing up. So a lot of good, a lot of good. And yes, some things to work on, but all in all, a very great weekend for LSU. But something else happened across the weekend for LSU. LSU women's took on Missouri. They also played Ole Miss in a very tight ball game before the weekend. And I want to talk about something I've kind of noticed from the LSU women's team and kind of react to those games. So hang tight for just a second. I'll be right back to share my thoughts.
Tiger fans, if you're looking for the best athletic apparel, then look no further than our friends over at Melreg. Melreg makes some of the best golf polos, golf pants, quarter zips, whatever you're looking for, Melreg's got it. And the best part is while at some places you're going to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on products like this, over at Melreg it is super affordable. You're going to find most things from 40 to 50 bucks. It is an absolute steal, and the best part is if you use our code BAYOUROAR at checkout, that's BAYOUROAR at checkout, you're going to save 15% off your order. So don't delay, head on over to Melreg, that's MELREG.com today, or use the link in the show notes below.
So as we wrap up here, we're going to talk about some LSU Lady Tiger basketball. And I think since the last time we talked about the women's team, they played the South Carolina game, Ole Miss, and then Missouri. And obviously that South Carolina game, that was a tight one. I mean, that was a battle all the way through. And what I said going into that game was how you performed in that game, whether it was a win or a loss, how you showed up was going to be a big indicator of what you could do. And LSU certainly showed up. I mean, really, South Carolina kind of just pulled away towards the end because Flage missed some big free throws. I think they should have gone back and looked at that three. I know it was really close and her toe may have been on the line. I still would have liked them to take a look at that three, but I also felt like the refs went from kind of letting them just play throughout the first half to they really tightened up in the second one and started calling a lot of fouls and stuff. And it was kind of weird how that flipped on its head. But nonetheless, LSU fought all the way to the end. And yes, it was a 7-point loss, but I think it was a very respectable 7-point loss because this team is heckin' talented. But the problem is so is South Carolina. That was two juggernauts going head to head. And at the end of the day, South Carolina just did enough to win it. So I felt good about that one. It was the game last Thursday against Ole Miss where it was like, yes, Ole Miss is ranked 17th, having a good year. I mean, it looked like they were going to pull off the upset. It really did. I mean, going into the fourth, it did not look good. And thanks to Malaysia Fulwiley, who had a really great performance and a couple other big plays, LSU was able to get the 78-70 win in Oxford. And then, of course, they came back home on Sunday against Missouri. And there were players wearing Missouri jerseys on the court. But I don't know if they really showed up to play because LSU absolutely kicked butt 108-55. And earlier in the year, when LSU lost their first two SEC games to Kentucky and Vanderbilt, the thing I kind of came on here and said was that I really liked the talent on this LSU women's team. It just felt like you almost had this problem, this really strange problem of almost having quote unquote too much talent, because it was like, man, you've got Jada Richard, you've got Flage Johnson, you've got Malaysia Fulwiley, you've got Kate Koval, you've got all of these ladies that you're trying, Michaela Williams, that you're trying to feed the ball to. And it's almost like they didn't know what to do. It's like they were almost kind of panicking, trying to figure out once they played some teams that actually made them stop and think about what they were doing, how to attack with all of those mouths that you got to feed. Well, Mulkey has seemed to figure out kind of how to balance all of these big time players. And you started to go on a little bit of a heater. And again, even against South Carolina, you started, to feel like they still had it all together. They just faced another really, really good team. But what I've started to kind of piece together as I've continued to watch this team play off and on throughout the SEC schedule is something that I think could be a concern for the run that this team could make, but also one that I think is something that maybe isn't the biggest detriment in the world to you. And that's this. In my mind, this LSU women's team is at their best when they slow down and let the offense set up. And I know sometimes you don't want that to happen because, you want to try to kind of get them while they're down or whatever. But here's what I'm saying. There's times where, yes, that's going to work. Flage this past Sunday, against Missouri, had a great fast break off of a steal, hit a big time layup. Awesome. What I'm talking about is more like you get a rebound, you start kind of trying to push it up the court a little bit. And it's like you got a 2-on-3 and you're trying to strike them while they're still setting up defensively. It's like Jada Richard will bring the ball up the court, dribble, 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 shoot, and just throws up a shot without really setting up plenty of time on the shot clock, plenty of opportunities to just let it slow down and develop. And you kind of just take a quick shot without thinking. They've done that a lot throughout SEC play. And maybe it is the talent thing. Maybe it is because you've got so much talent, you think, I can just throw up a shot. It's no big deal. But I think the thing is, with a team like this with so much talent, it's better, honestly, to slow it down and let the offense develop. Because when they start running that pick and roll game, they are very, very good. And they end up playing very. Zakiya Johnson has been a monster rebounding and getting the ball back up. You've got the ability to kind of really attack the basket well with a lot of these players. I think sometimes it's to your detriment to try to go so fast. Slow it down a little bit when you bring it up the court. Because here's the thing, you know, if you're missing shots and you don't have the numbers, you don't have a good shot at getting that one back. And so I'd like to see the Lady Tigers kind of start to slow it down a little bit more. Because I think at some point a team's going to notice, like, hey, when you force them to kind of play faster than they want to, they may struggle a little bit. And look, certainly I think towards the end of the South Carolina game, you saw that they tried to go down and score quick to try to, convert before it became too far out of reach, and it didn't work. And I know that not every opportunity you're going to have a chance to slow down and put up a shot. Sometimes you are going to have to operate quickly, and that's just going to happen in basketball. But I'm just saying, it feels like, 7 out of every 10 possessions, sometimes they're going up the court quickly and just trying to score as fast as they possibly can. And I just don't think this team needs to do that. I think they need to slow down. Now, again, I don't always think that's going to be a huge detriment to the success of this team. Again, this is a very, very good team. And sometimes you have players that are good enough to kind of do that kind of stuff. Like Steph Curry is somebody that can just kind of run around, run down and just hoist up a shot and hit it. Problem is, I don't think as good as Michaela Williams is, as good as Flage is, even as good as, Full Wiley is and all them, none of them are like at the shooting level of a Steph Curry. Steph Curry is kind of on his own planet as a shooter, anyways. But like, you don't have anybody with that kind of ability. You got really good players. You've got players that are going to be, very, very high picks in the WNBA draft when it's their turn. But you just don't have those types of players that can just run around and hoist up a shot and just almost ridiculously just hit whatever they put up. I think this team needs to kind of methodically slow down, take their time, and methodically pick opponents apart. I think that is when they are at their best. So if they can continue to do that, I think they're going to be really good and have a good run in the tournament. It's just, can you kind of convince yourself enough to be able to do that, especially when you're facing the best of the best? Because the season is, for the women's at least, coming down to the wire here. You've got one more game left in February. You're going to play Tennessee on Thursday. And then you've got one game in March where you're going to go on the road to Mississippi State on Sunday, March the 1st. So you're about to be at the tournament time for women's basketball. And again, a lot of this is going to be, do you bring your best stuff when it's time? And I think LSU brings its best stuff when it can let the game kind of come to them and slow it down. That's just my 2 cents. Again, Kim Mulkey, I think she knows what she's doing at this point. I'm sure she's not a fool. I'm sure she knows when to tell them to push the buttons to go and when to kind of ease off the throttle. But I just think all in all, this Lady Tigers team has got so much talent. It's going to be a shame if they cost themselves game by shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak. So that's what I would like to see. But still, such a good team. Excited to see. They'll probably end up in my estimation. They'll probably win against Tennessee. Tennessee's really kind of cooled off, and then they should beat Mississippi State, and then they should be on their way to getting a pretty good run in the SEC tournament before playing in their March Madness tournament. So excited to see where the Lady Tigers go. But again, it's kind of in their hands to see how their fate falls. But we'll keep following along with that. Of course, we'll keep following along with baseball here as well. Hey, if you would, please make sure to like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Just share with your friends as well. We love covering the Tigers and just everything that's going on right now. You can also follow us on Instagram at Bayou Roar Pod. We'd love to interact with you there. And until next time, hey, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And let's go, Tigers.